Hello and welcome to another episode of Mean Brews. Today I'm covering Belgian Witbier, the nearly extinct beer style brought back to life by Pierre Celis of Hoegaarden and later of Celis Brewery in Austin, Texas. This is one of the first craft beer styles I ever tried, living in Austin and going to the University of Texas, and it's one of my favorites. I've done really well in the competition circuit, and I'm going to present a little bit of a different recipe this time. I'm going to present two recipes, the Meanbrews Recipe and the one that I've done very successfully with here in the Lone Star Circuit in Texas. So let's get right into the data. I found 39 winning recipes of Witbier, 3 of which were Best of Show, 19 gold, 4 silver, 1 bronze, and 11 award-winning examples. The BJCP style is 24A, a refreshing, elegant, tasty, moderate-strength wheat-based beer, ale. It has a history of a 400-year-old Belgian beer style that died in the 1950s. It was later revived by Pierre Celis of Hoegaarden and has grown steadily in popularity over time. With regards to the stability, the style is pretty stable, not a lot of change over time. However, there's a lot of variation between recipes, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. Original gravity, right at 1.052, which is at the maximum of the BJCP range. That was the mean for all the recipes I saw, all the way down to 1.040 and 1.062. So big range here. Small range for BJCP, but winning beers are being presented with different gravities all over the place. IBUs, the mean was 18 IBUs with a lower range of 10 to 28. Again, airs on the high side of the BJCP range shown here. People are leaning towards the high side for IBUs and original gravity for this style. We're seeing a shift in the IBUs from 15 in 1995 to 2020. We've seen go up to 19, almost 20 IBUs. So I call this the IPA shift affecting every beer out there. People are just desensitized to IBUs, and it's evolving and migrating into other beer styles. SRM, oddly enough, this is on the high end of the range. Typically, you would see this in the middle. It's hard to hit those numbers without really going for it and using really pale malts, but I wouldn't pay too close attention. Try to aim for the mean, which is about 3.8. The malt percentages, about 72% of the malts on average were base malts, 0.6% crystal, 0.1% toast, and 27.6% adjuncts, mainly the flaked malts, and some simple sugars as well. Base malts. Pilsner malt, the most proficient. 100% of the recipes used a Pilsner malt, either German or Belgian Pilsner, at an average of 45% of the grist. The next most common was wheat malt. 63% of the recipes used a wheat malt at an average of 40% of the grist. Munich, 21% of the recipes used a light Munich malt at a very low rate of 2.7% of the grist. And then one recipe used a 6-row malt right here at about 12.5%, 13% of the grist. Munich is something that's popped up only recently. You'll see this presented in my recipe, but not in the Meanbrews recipe, all the way up to 7, almost 8% of the grist. So it's only something that's happened since the 2010s, but quite a few recipes are putting a little bit of Munich in there to give it some sweetness and toastiness and some complexity to the style. Crystal and toast malts, not a lot of recipes. These are all one-offs. The most prominent was Golden Naked Oats, which is a crystal oat malt. 2 recipes use that at right around 8.5%. 5.3% of the recipes at 8.6% of the grist. The others were Carapils, Biscuit, Light Crystal, and Medium Crystal. I wouldn't recommend using any of these in this style. It's not needed. Adjuncts. Okay, here's where the special part of this beer comes in. Flaked wheat, unmalted flaked wheat, torrefied wheat, wheat flour was used in 71% of the recipes. at an average of 29.3% of the grist. Look at this range, down from 2% to 56%. Very wide range used wheat. And this is kind of split between the wheat malt and the unmalted wheats. So beers that tended to be on this side used very little wheat malt. Beers on this side of the range used a lot of wheat malt comparatively. Next one, I don't know why this is out of order, but candy sugar, 21% of the recipes use candy sugar at 6.4% of the grist. Flaked oats, 58% of the recipes, quite a significant portion use flaked oats at right at 7.2% of the grist. And then we have flaked barley, star fruit puree, winning in a straight up Witbier recipe. Flaked maize, flaked rye, and honey were rounded out the table. 1 to 2 recipes each. Definitely wouldn't recommend using these either in your style or your recipe. All right, spice. So spice, this is going to be per 5-gallon batch. I didn't normalize it per gallon, but I will at the end. This is important. This is an important part of this beer style. It's what makes it unique. So let's start with the most prominent, which was coriander. 84% of the recipes used coriander in their recipe at an average of 0.85 ounces in a 5-gallon batch. This goes all the way to 5. One recipe used 5 ounces in a 5-gallon batch, which I cut it off here, but I think that's an anomaly. Stay within this mean, stay within the averages here. The next most prominent was dried sweet orange peel. 63.2% of the recipes used a dried sweet orange peel at an average of 0.69 ounces in a 5-gallon batch. The next most prominent is dried bitter orange, curacao orange. 36.8% of the recipes used. This is the traditional orange peel to use with this style at an average of 0.54 ounces per gallon. We had a bunch of other ones. I don't know if I put them on here or not. Nope, but I'll talk through them. Chamomile was used in about 3 recipes. Grains of Paradise in 2. Black pepper, lemon peel, lavender, and cumin seed or other spices used in a single recipe or 2 recipes each. I actually use chamomile and grains of paradise in my final recipe. I find that put me over the edge to get me to getting a gold medal every time I enter this beer. So you'll see that reflected in my recipe at the end. Evolution of the orange peel additions, both of which are increasing. Bitter more so than the sweet, but over time we're seeing an increase of 0.4 ounces per 5 gallons for the bitter, all the way up to 0.6. Not as much as pronounced for the sweet, but definitely both increasing over time. Bittering hops. Saaz was used in 29% of the recipes, Tettnang, Howler, and then a slew of others in some of the other recipes. You'll see both recipes reflect using Saaz hops here. Flavor hops used, if they were used, Saaz was used in 13% of the recipes, and then Styrian Goldings, Amarillo, Mount Rainier, Cascade, and Howler Tower for flavor hops. Aroma hops, Saaz, 26% of the recipes use Saaz hops for aroma hops, followed by Styrian Goldings, Amarillo, Mount Rainier, and Tettnang. For the rate of hop additions, for aroma hops, do this backwards. The average was about 0.11. 39% of the recipes used an aroma hop at an average 0.11 ounce per gallon. And 32% of the recipes used a flavor hop at an average of 0.08 ounces per gallon. Not a lot of a big mass of hops used in any of these recipes. And not a lot of recipes used them. Right on the fringe of whether you should use them or not for this style. Flavor hops were decreasing with time. Less and less use of flavor hops, so you won't see that reflected in either recipe. Mash type. 8% of the recipes were actually decocted, surprisingly. Traditional Belgians use a step mash with protein rest and a couple other steps in between there. So 44% of the recipes use a step mash. more than half used some sort of incremental temperature mash, either decoction or step mash. And 48% used a single infusion mash. For the mash rest, the glucose rest, there were a couple recipes that used, 3 recipes used a glucose rest, average of 107 Fahrenheit, 41 Celsius, for an average duration of about 20 minutes. This is the deal with the oats and the other flaked grains you may have. If you use rice hulls, you could probably skip this rest. Protein rest, the average temperature is 122 for an average duration of 24 minutes. That's 50 degrees Celsius. And right at about 50% of the recipes did a protein rest. A couple recipes, 2 or 3, did a beta rest, 144 Fahrenheit average, 62 Celsius for an average of 25 minutes. And then the vast majority did an alpha rest at 153 Fahrenheit average, or 63 Celsius for an average of 60 minutes. The rest temperature for the alpha rest has been increasing over time from 51 degrees now up to about 54 degrees. So take that in consideration. Probably trying to build some more body and mouthfeel into the beer. While the protein restoration is going down over time. So this is the time spent in the protein rest, up at about 30, now less than 20. Just reflective of better modified malts that we have nowadays versus back in the 90s and 2000s, where we may be using malts that require a longer protein rest to break down some of those amino acids, proteins into amino acids. Boil duration, the average was 68. We had some 90-minute boils, but 68 was the average. Not really needed a long boil for this. You don't want to develop any color, so a shorter boil is better for this style. With the yeast used, the wide majority is White Labs 400 or Y Yeast 3944, the traditional Hoegaarden strain. There were some others used. Most notably, I really like this 720 yeast. I want to try it in a wit. To me, that's another Hoegaarden strain used for their Grand Cru. But some really interesting ones up here, really from the earlier recipes where yeast selection was very slim. Even a Pilsner Kell lager yeast was used in some of these recipes. Stick to this one. This is the traditional one, and what's going to get you there as far as those esters and phenolics you're looking for with this style. Water chemistry, I think 3 or 4 recipes reported water chemistry, and these are the ranges, 20 to 110 for calcium, 0 to 65 for magnesium with an average of around 20. Not too surprising, the sourness of high levels of magnesium kind of complement this style, so I wasn't surprised to see high levels of magnesium here. Sodium, quite tight, between 10 and 30 with an average of 20. Sulfate 40 to 90 with an average of about 62. Chlorides 10 to 75 with an average of around 55. And then carbonates up here, just depending upon the base water used, ranged all over the board. Average of carbonates was about 70. These are in parts per million, by the way. Fermentation temperature, the average was 68 Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius. All the way up to 75 for some of the recipes. Quite a big range. You'll see it reflected. We'll start about here and let it free rise, which is traditional for most Belgian styles. Other variables, the average carbonation volumes. This should be a highly carbonated beer. The average was 2.93, but the highest was 3.75. I carbonate on the high end of this range. Really complements, makes it more refreshing, really stands out at the judges' table, and it makes for a great presentation with that big, fluffy, moussey white head. So I'm going to share 2 recipes. I'm going to do the Meanbrews recipe based upon the average, and then my personal recipe. Highest BJCP score I've had on my recipe is 45. I've won 5 gold medals and 1 silver medal. You'll see the competitions here, including the gold at the Bluebonnet Brew-Off, which is the largest single-site homebrewing competition in the world. So quite proud of that achievement. I also got second there in 2018. So Quite proud of that. All right, Meanbrews Recipe. Let's get right into it. 46.7% Belgian Pilsner malt, 25.7% red wheat. Try to get the red wheat. It's more appropriate for this style versus the white wheat, and it will keep that haze a lot better than the white wheat will. 22.9% flaked wheat, 4.7% flaked oats, and 2 hop additions. We're going to do 17 IBUs of Saaz hops at the 70-minute boil, and then we're going to put in an aroma hop, about 0.11 ounce per gallon or 0.82 grams per liter of Saaz hops at 5 minutes. We're going to put in 0.17 ounces per gallon or 1.27 grams per liter of coriander seed, and that coriander seed, you need to crush it very well before you add it at the 5-minute point of your boil. We're going to put 0.12 ounce per gallon or 0.90 grams per liter of bitter orange peel and the same amount of sweet orange peel. These should be dried. And we're going to use the White Labs WLP 400. Shoot for an original gravity of 1.054 with 19 IBUs. Try to hit somewhere around these numbers for your water chemistry. Shooting for about a 5.5 mash pH. That seems to be about the sweet spot. I'm going to do a step mash, 122 Fahrenheit or 50 Celsius for 15 minutes. And then a saccharification rest at 153 Fahrenheit or 67 Celsius for 60 minutes. I'm going to mash out and sparge as usual and boil for a minimum of 70 minutes. And again, crush the coriander and use the dried orange peels for your spice additions. Chill to 66 Fahrenheit, oxygenate and pitch your yeast. Ferment at 68 Fahrenheit and allow it to free rise up to 78. Allow it to go as high as that. Do not cold crash this beer. You want that yeast in suspension. You can keg it, transfer it to a keg or bottle at 3 volumes. Don't try to keg at 3 volumes. Use the high pressure volumes or high pressure bottles, Belgian beer bottles, if you're going to carbonate to 3 or more volumes of CO2. Now, my winning recipe. I have 4.8% rice hulls, 40.5% of Belgian Pilsner malt, 23.2% of flaked wheat, 21.9% of Belgian wheat malt, probably the red wheat malt if I can get my hands on it. Right around 6% of flaked oats, 1.7% of Munich 1 from Weirmann, 2% clear candy sugar, and only a single addition of Saaz hops at 60 minutes, around 19.6 IBUs. I'm gonna use fresh orange peel. I did a test where I graded fresh orange peel, not the pith, just the peel, and weighed it. Let it dry out, air dry, and weighed it again. And it's about a 3-to-1 ratio. Fresh orange peel weighs about 3 times dried. So 0.54 ounces per gallon or 4.04 grams per liter of fresh orange peel at 5 minutes. 0.19 ounce per gallon or 1.42 grams per liter of coriander seed crushed again at 5 minutes. 0.03 ounces per gallon or 0.22 grams per liter of chamomile. You can use chamomile tea or the chamomile they supply at the whole flowers at the homebrew supply shop. Not a lot of chamomile, but just enough to give it something different. And then paradise seed. Again, these are crushed with the coriander. Even less paradise seed, 0.01 ounce per gallon or 0.07 grams per liter. It's like a pinch per 1 gallon batch. I've started using the Mangrove Jack dried yeast, and I'll tell you why in a second. M21, I found it's just as good as the White Labs 400, and it helps me with my bottle conditioning, which is why I use it. I actually sprinkle extra yeast in each bottle before I cap them. A big part of the flavor profile of this beer is the flavor of the yeast, and that extra yeast in the bottle really sets it off. My original gravity is 1.052 with about 20 IBUs. Water chemistry is exactly this. This is what I use for my style. I will put in the notes, that is a typo, I will try to fix that in the notes on the video. Mash pH of 5.5. I'm going to do a single infusion mash of 154 for 60 minutes. I mash out, I do not boil off. I actually stir the mash before I run the mash off from the mash tun. I want to suspend as many starch particles as I can into the boil. And then I boil for 60 minutes. Again, we crush the coriander and paradise seed and use freshly grated sweet orange peel. Do not bring the pith into the table here. That pith is very bitter and will not pair well with any of the other flavors of this beer. Chill to 68, oxygenate and pitch yeast. I ferment at 70 and free rise up to 78 Fahrenheit. Again, I don't cold crash. And I bottle condition to 3 volumes of CO2. And again, I sprinkle some M21 into each bottle from another packet just to give it that extra yeast bite. And that's it. That's it for wit beer. I'm going to put another. I'm going to let you choose the next style, and I'm going to put the poll on Homebrewing Reddit channel this time. So check out the Homebrewing Reddit page, and I will put a link in the video description for Homebrewing Reddit. Also, if you haven't seen the Witbier homebrew challenge video that Martin Keene has done, he actually brewed a version of the Meanbrews recipe. So I'll put a link in the description. You can check that out and see how this beer turned out and how well they liked it in their tasting session. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.